Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, gamer boys and gamer girls, welcome back to the pod. Summer is just around the corner, April faded away and we are in the final push before the holidays. April was a busy one for me, I have changed jobs, V and me got vaccinated and I have started to get fitter to get the sexy summer body. So more or less I'm a happy and content man. Now, May's bundle was revealed before time, so we had fun discussing which major title we will pick. As per usual, we put 3 to 5 hours into each game, so when you guys reach the end of the video, you'll have a pretty good idea what to pick. So without further ado, I let V take over.
Genesis is the fourth entry to the well-known Darksiders series, and story-wise, plays as a prequel to the events of the other three. In this top-down, isometric hack-and-slash ARPG title, you'll be following the story of Strife and War, as they are sent out by the Chart Council to investigate Lucifer's shenanigans. Gameplay-wise, you can expect the usual core Darksiders experience of hacking your way through various demonkin, either controlling Strife, who specializes in a ranged area control playstyle, or War, who just as in the first entry from 2010, sports a big-ass sword and favors in-your-face combat. You can freely switch between the two at any time for combat purposes, and are often forced to do so to solve puzzles in your way. Alternatively, you could also jump into co-op mode with a buddy and take control of one each. As mentioned earlier, just as the previous titles have done so, Genesis also takes a shot at a different genre than earlier entries, and this time around the choice was the top-down ARPG genre. This seems to have worked out mostly fine, fights are fun and fast-paced when blasting through henchmen, and incoming attacks are well telegraphed, so you shouldn't have difficulty timing your dodges. There's a chance you'll dodge into some wonky position and get stuck for a second, but my only real complaint in this regard so far lies with the end of level boss fights, which so far feel rather uninspired. I do hope this will change sooner rather than later. Controls are tight if you're playing with a controller. The only negative is how the camera angle doesn't exactly serve the platforming sections too well. Every now and then you can easily find yourself trying either timed escape sequences or just collection parts over and over again, simply because it's not obvious where you're located in the air compared to your environment. Speaking of changes, Genesis is the entry in the series that takes customizing your protagonists the furthest through the creature core system. As you do what you're best at, aka mowing down hordes of little shitskis, you'll collect orbs of power that you can then slot into what's essentially a talent tree. The bigger the foe you acquire it from, the stronger the core, and beyond that, matching the archetype of the core with that of the slot further boosts your power gain. As for the benefits offered, these can range from your usual 1% attack power increase to occasionally summoning hellhounds or adding additional effects to abilities like leaving a trail of fire behind or slowing enemies on impact. It's certainly a welcome additional system you can tinker with. As for presentation, your surroundings are beautifully crafted, a real pleasure to traverse, and same goes for other in-game models such as PCs or enemies. Cutscenes mostly aren't animated, just pop-up dialogues between portraits, but these get hard carried by the voice acting and the music is top-notch as well. Replayability will come from both the different difficulty levels and revisiting previously played zones/levels, as in typical Darksiders fashion, these will be packed full of collectibles, of which a big portion you will find locked behind mechanics you can't interact with until you later on discover the means to do so. Doesn't really matter whether you're an existing fan of the Darksiders series already, or completely new to the universe, I would strongly recommend you give this title a chance and let the laid-back, spectacle gameplay take you on a fun journey.
Cook Serve Delicious 3. This fucking game. I have to mention beforehand that this game is really not my cup of tea. A man like me doesn't enjoy this stuff. So much so that I had to involve a second opinion, my SOs, in order to really see if I was the problem or the game is. Don't get me wrong, I still spent 3 hours with this game, but then I had to make my partner to play this, because I just wasn't sure if really I was the problem or the game. Okay, so this game is essentially a button smasher and a memory game. You will be the cook who is on the road, and during each stop you will be serving your guests. When I first saw this game I thought, okay, this will be fun, after all I have played the Overcooked series and I played them to completion. Well, how wrong I was. This game makes you get recipes from a scale 1 to 5, 1 being the easiest, 5 being the hardest. So the way you cook them is by pressing buttons that are corresponding to each ingredient for each recipe. And there are at least 100 recipes with at least 2-3 ingredients, 2-3 buttons at least. Oh, and the best part is that the key for a particular ingredient isn't always consistent between dishes. So the game really boils down to a f***ing mess, where you are trying to juggle 4 fucking dishes with 12 ingredients in 8 minutes for 40 people. It only takes 1 mishit key to ruin an entire holding station worth of food, which is almost a guaranteed loss for that stop. I really wish I could see through this goddamn mess and could see the beauty of this game, but I just can't. Nor could my SO, although she's really into this kind of games. I hated this game so much that even now when I'm writing this script, I'm getting pissed and frustrated. So overall, no, I don't think you should get this game. But maybe if you are into this stuff, it will worth your while.
Metro Exodus is the third installment of the Metro series, based on the novels of Dmitry Glukhovsky. I have to prefix, neither have I read the books, nor have I played the previous titles, so I'll be looking at Exodus as an outsider, but for those interested, according to the interwebs, the story picks up exactly where the previous title dropped off, following the same protagonist. As for genre, Exodus is a first-person shooter slash stealther slash survival horror game, a mix of the classic single-player experience of following a heavily guided route from one end of a level to the other, and some hub-based open-world areas. I realize this sounds like the perfect opportunity for a mess, but it ends up working decently enough. In practice, as in single-player FPS titles of old, you'll receive your objective to reach, and to do so, you'll follow glorified corridors with maybe an optional route or two. On your way there, you'll come across a variety of enemy types, bandits, militants, mutant beasts, zombies, and so on. You have the option to run in guns blazing, but this is where the survival horror element kicks in, as you're not exactly overrun by ammunition. Thus, to avoid blowing everything on one pack of mutants just to be farmed by the upcoming bandit fight, you might want to take a stealthier approach, sneaking past as many as you can and dealing with the necessary fights as silently as possible. Should you end up running out of ammo anyway, you have the option to replenish some of it via crafting. During your trips, you'll come across 3 types of collectibles, 2 of them just unnamed parts, used as basically currency for creating usables, such as ammo or medkits, bombs and so on, or currency for maintenance of your weapon and equipment, as these deteriorate through use and lose efficiency. The other set of collectibles are the weapons and weapon upgrades. These you can find scattered around the world if you take your time exploring, or as drops from enemies and through the crafting interface, they provide for one of the more fun aspects of the game. Whenever you come across a weapon, you have the option to grab it and roll with it for a while, replacing the one you were using, or if it has any modifications you haven't yet seen, you can strip it and using your portable workbench, put it on your current loadout, modifying your damage output, weapon stability, max size and so on. It's a simple, yet surprisingly satisfying system. As you might have noticed from the recordings in the background, graphics is one of the stronger side of Exodus. From the second you start your playthrough, quality ranges at the worst from good all the way up to exceptional, with details such as the protagonist's breath misting the gas mask's visor. Speaking of the protagonist though, he's a weird one. Developers have chosen for him to only interact with his surrounding via gestures, as if he was mute, but in fact, he actually narrates between chapters, so it appears he isn't actually mute. I assume this design choice was to serve immersion, as this way, instead of the character's reaction to events being forced on us, we have the option to mentally form our own opinion and response, thus allowing higher immersion and engagement. Unfortunately, in practice, this instead results in clunky interactions with NPCs and awkward moments of silence in heated situations, leaving a weird aftertaste and feeling of the protagonist being a dumb beatstick, thus, in the end, instead of immersing, rather alienating the player. Weirdly enough, you don't even need to be involved in that manner for NPC interactions to feel awkward. Even among themselves, they can act weird, and just in general, they mostly feel over-exaggerated, cartoonish almost, despite the setting clearly not aiming for that aesthetic. While we're already checking off cons, we might as well touch on how it's easy to feel lost every now and then. For example, while the game introduces new concepts that you are expected to check out, or just conversation lines you're following, NPCs have a tendency to bugger off in some direction they expect you to follow. Staring down a pair of binoculars, you obviously won't notice where they exit. It's similar when they just tell you to look somewhere or go somewhere that isn't obvious instantaneously, and they just wait for you to do it. I'm not trying to ask for neon signs to follow here, I'm just trying to point out an issue with pacing. If the game just gave you a few more seconds to interpret your surroundings or things to do, this whole thing wouldn't be an actual issue. And last but not least, there's the matter of technical anomalies. You'll come across graphical glitches occasionally. Every now and then I experience some weird warping where I would be instantaneously relocated a few feet from my original position. And just before the 3-hour mark, I also experienced a hard crash, but at least the game auto-saves frequently enough for me not to have lost any progress on the back of it. On the other hand, combat feels intriguing. When you're facing but one or maybe two enemies, it's a piece of cake. But as the numbers mount up, there's a legit chance to just die even on normal difficulty, keeping you on your toes. And just as graphics, sounds also have their high moments too. Many a time have I identified perfectly the exact direction of an incoming attack in the heat of battle, just based on the sound work, and that always feels great. All in all, on the back of the shortcomings mentioned earlier, I can't put Exodus in the top category of this month. As also mentioned earlier, I have no prior history with the Metro universe, and this installment didn't hook me enough for me to keep playing, but I think it's important to highlight that I can absolutely imagine how this game could be of interest to many others.
Family Man. Family Man is a dark, story-led RPG/life simulator. For the most part, it is a resource and time management game with a focus on your family and your overall surroundings. The entire premise of the game is that you have been dragged into a stupid get-rich-fast plan by your friend, which ended badly. Well, it ended fucked up. Hence, you are in a position where you owe a lot of money and you're being blackmailed. There is a constant tension between feeding your family and trying to stay on the right side of morality, while making enough money to satisfy your debts. All your actions directly affects your family and the town you live in. Karma is a bitch, as they say, and well, it is all true in here as well. The graphics of the game is quite basic. There is little to no voice acting, but despite these, I really like playing this one. It reminded me of a Flash game from the early 2000s where you had to get rich or die trying, either by working hard or going down the dark path. I tried to find the Flash game, but sadly I wasn't able to find it, so if you know what this game is, please write it down in the comments, I'd like to revisit it. The characters are okay, some of them are well written and some of them are cliché, but the overall impression was good. The music really complements the tension in this game, and you can really feel the constant struggle you're in. This game was the most surprising for me in this bundle, although it isn't the greatest of all time, far from it actually. I still like the playthrough. Admittedly, the game isn't too long. My first playthrough took me around 3 to 4 hours, but there are 4 endings to it, meaning it's around 15-16 hours long if you want to see all endings. So if you would like a dark story-led RPG or kind of a life simulator, pick this one.
Mørkredd is a physics-based puzzle game released just a few months ago. While it was clearly designed to be a cooperative experience, it is just as enjoyable solo. The core concept of the game revolves around 2 figures controlled by the player or players who need to reach the end of each level, but have to do so while staying within the light of varying sources, as darkness means certain death. This also includes the shadows of any and all objects, including that of your partner, and serves as the base of the puzzles you'll come across on your way. To solve these puzzles, you'll have to figure out the order of switches, deal with maze-like situations, or withstand the elements, just to name a few. You shouldn't be worried for a second, even though the game gets slightly more and more difficult as you progress. It never exceeds the point of just halting you. Majority of the time, you'll quickly figure out what the solution is, and it just comes down to execution. To further this ease of access, Mørkredd is also ridiculously generous with its checkpoints that are placed basically after every single puzzle section. Just to visualize this, no matter what point you fail at, I honestly don't think you'd ever have to replay more than 30 seconds since your previous checkpoint. The game sports a dense atmosphere of mystery and unease, as you have absolutely no clue what's going on, why are these weird figures doing what they are doing, and what the end goal is. This is supported by both the sound design, that mostly foregoes music for the sake of setting the mood via ambient sounds, and the visuals that heavily remind me of Limbo or Black the Fall. Of the two, I'd say sound design is better quality, while visuals work perfectly fine most of the time. You'll come across the occasional glitch of a missing shadow, or a non-deadly shadow, which can also happen, and then you'll reach the very last area of the game, where it becomes blatantly obvious it either needed more time to be polished, or was an overreach from the development perspective. Speaking of the final area, I'm not gonna include any recordings of it to avoid any spoilers, but that part alone is responsible for any negative feedback I have for this title. We've already mentioned how the visuals are lacking during the last 20 or so percentile of the game. Further to this, the theme is also something I didn't like, and for the very last 10%, developers decided to completely change the gameplay, which on one hand shows admirable courage, but unfortunately results in a section so out of place it hurts. How do I know all of this about the game's end, you ask? Well, unfortunately Mørkredd is a short experience. I'd wager anyone would get through the game in 2 to 3 hours. On the positive side though, this also comes with the added benefit of fast pacing, and neither any of the zones or mechanics ever overstaying their welcome and becoming dull. I would 100%, no questions asked, recommend you give Mørkredd a try. Ideally, with a partner, keeping in mind the game supports Steam Remote Play, so you don't even need 2 copies necessarily. But even if that's not possible, or you don't feel like socializing, have a go at it solo, like I did, and enjoy the ambidexterity training experience of controlling both characters at the same time, and feeling the 2 sides of your brain going to war with one another.
Fury Unleashed. Fury Unleashed, or as I like to call FU, is a classic 2D action platformer like Contra or Dead Cells. In this game, the players will fight their way through different worlds, which are different editions of a comic series. The story is about the artist who is suffering from a mental block to continue his story. And yes, you have guessed it, the hero of the game is the protagonist of the comic. In the first 3 levels, we are in a jungle full of voodoo priests and vicious plants. Then we go to a Nazi base, and sadly I couldn't reach the third part just yet. The game can be quite hard and it is kicking my butt to this date. The map is randomly generated, but it is sectioned, meaning the generation will have a wide variety. So far I haven't really noticed if the game uses the same modules frequently or not. The enemies offer a nice challenge. The mini-bosses will pose a greater threat, so you guys will feel the tension. The levels are full of random loot boxes and traders, meaning you can tailor your gear to your playstyle if you're lucky enough to get all the pieces, just like in Dead Cells or in Rogue Legacy. Submachine guns, shotguns, rocket launchers, plasma guns, laser rifles, stun guns, saw blade launchers and much more are on the offer. Of course you will have to unlock them by completing different feats during your playthrough. Oh, and of course this wide variety also stands for the melee weapons and armor and grenades. Oh, and of course abilities. The main reason that this game is a strong contender when it comes to picking the games is that it is fun. The action element of the game is in the spotlight throughout the game. Jumping, shooting, dodging and slicing enemies in half will never force you to think. You just have to enjoy the ride. As you are the hero of the comic, you will get valuable ink for the kills, which you will be using to level up and earn upgrade points after your runs. As per the roguelike standards, you will be unlocking passive traits that you will make your life easier as you go along your way and die 1,000 times. Because you will die a lot. But that's just part of the journey and the learning experience. Fury Unleashed is not a long runner like Dead Cells or Binding of Isaac, but that's exactly why you guys may want to claim this, as it can be pleasing for players for whom some roguelikes are way too hard to play. I had fun with it, and I can only suggest trying it out.
Retimed is one of those wacky, cartoony, few-player lobby PvP party games, mainly intended for you to grab a group of friends, hop online, attempt to beat one another for 30 minutes in a couple of 3 to 5 minute matches, then get bored and move on. If this is still too vague, think the likes of Duck Game or Speedrunners if you will. As for this entry, core concept is a 2D battle shooter platformer arena. You spawn in with 4 bullets, you can restock from the ammo crates scattered around the platform, and based on the multiplayer game mode you choose, there's a set number of frags you need to pick up to win. There's also a neat twist, as if you'd be in danger of being hit and you still have ammo on you, you'll enter a short bullet time effect and may attempt to cheat death. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Well, unfortunately, we face a few small issues, and the major one as well. As for the small ones, neither the controls nor the aiming feels especially good. Even though you have the option to run around, jump, even double and triple jump, duck and dash if you have ammo, 95% of the time I didn't feel incentivized to use anything other than jumps, mostly on the back of dodging not giving any iframes. As for the aiming part, you have a visible crosshair to rely on, but it's too close to yourself, and the bullet travel speed is slower than expected, leaving you slightly off the target often. I get that you'll get better the more time you put into it, but we're talking about a damn party game. I'm here to hop on and hop off, having some fun. If I'm looking for something to practice and put hours into to get better, I'd much rather boot up a fighter game. On another note, Retimed has a single player mode for those interested. It introduces the different arena types and their effects, such as allowing bullets to fly through platforms, portals, falling icicles or rubber walls, and comes with 2 additional challenge difficulties. To be perfectly fair, I like the addition of this mode to the game for people to familiarize themselves with the environment, but the challenge difficulty part just gets boring as hell, as it feels you're fighting more against the clunky controls and aim than the increasing number of difficulty of AI opponents. Gripe number 3 is the lack of a rank system for online multiplayer, as this is just a hotbed for lobbies to get filled with players of vastly different skill levels, resulting in a shitty experience for both the newbie being shat on and the experienced player being unchallenged and wasting his time. All the previous is nothing but a grain of sand compared to the desert of an issue of the complete and utter lack of a player base. I personally somehow looked out and managed to get into one duel match and one free-for-all lobby, but my third attempt at finding a game resulted in a more than an hour long wait for nothing. Seriously, looking at the Steam chart entry of this title is just flat out depressing. To give credit where it's due, I have to mention that at the very least the online platform feels solid. During the free-for-all game that I played, a player just rage quit before round 3 started, and instead of my expectations being fulfilled and the full lobby crashing, the game adjusted and lowered the necessary kill count for winning the round, which was impressive. The game also allows for you to just hop into single player while you're waiting for a lobby to be assembled, which is also neat. Regardless, even with these functions, and if it didn't have clunky controls, there's no way I can recommend a multiplayer game with a close to non-existent player base. Retimed is a solid skip.
Ruchałki ciebie. Kikyros Vane, vermuchał. Reszwy perchyj verpomry chyłkuj, są płykać rym.
Hellpoint. In Hellpoint, the game takes place on Irid Novu, a derelict space station in close orbit around a black hole. The player will fill in the shoes of a spawn, a synthetic creature whose mission is to collect the information for a mysterious voice that speaks to us and identifies itself as the creator. Hellpoint plays safe and uses all the tricks in the playbook. The combat in which every hit matters, the weapons that will improve as we use them, gaining abilities that at first would have seemed impossible. The combat in general is well implemented. All the enemies have their attack patterns, their respective armor and weaponry, different resistances to different kind of damage types. They stun, interrupt, stagger, break guard, etc. When it works, it is a painfully beautiful experience. The problem is that sometimes it doesn't work. The hitboxes seem a bit iffy. You get hit when you perfectly dodged, then you wonder if you messed up or the attack has an additional invisibility area. Sadly, this happens from the beginning, and although it only happens once in a while, it can be very frustrating when reaching difficult areas. Also, as you can see now, enemies are sometimes dumb as hell, like, I'm killing my man in here, clearly as loudly as I can, yet my boy over there doesn't even take the hint. On the other hand, exploration is clearly the star of Hellpoint. The levels are huge and full of secrets, hidden doors and false walls all around. Since jumping is something you can do in here, it enhances this whole section and allows verticality, making the player want to scrutinize every nook and cranny of each map. As a good descendant of the Metroidvanias, the levels hide secrets behind doors and shortcuts that we can only open when we have met certain criteria, giving us the feeling that there is always something new to discover. The only tiny problem of mine in connection with this, that there are sections in this game where everything looks the same, and you don't really know if you have been here before or you weren't. Another interesting mechanic is the clock that shows our position with respect to the Horizon event, and depending on the clock, different events are unleashed for a limited time. These range from opening certain accesses a couple of times a day, to increasing the difficulty of enemies in exchange for multiplying the quality of the items they leave when they die, to opening portals to other dimensions from where the waves of enemies arrive that we must defeat. The bosses in this game are a 50-50 in my opinion. Some of them are great, out of the ones I could actually kill, and some of them felt a bit bland, repeating the same 3-4 tags that they have. The lore situation is all the same like in every other Souls-like game. You have to look for every datapad, every disk, every memory fragment in order to see what happened. What happened to the space station, who is the creator, etc. Overall, despite its issues, many of which are understandable from an independent studio like Cradle Games, Hellpoint is fun and brings an interesting grain of sand to the genre, and its beautiful horror sci-fi aesthetic that the entire work displays is just pure joy to look at. So, if you are a Souls-like genre fan, you have to pick this one.
Size Matters is a fun, unique single-player experience that mostly reminded me of Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and left me wondering whether there was a way to expand on it in a manner that would result in a similar co-op experience. The premise is simple. You play as a scientist from a first-person POV, you're locked into a laboratory and you accidentally got poisoned by some substance, which results in you continuously shrinking, effectively to the point of death. Your goal is to combat this poison by concocting an antidote, and to do so isn't even that hard. You'll first aim to gather all necessary ingredients and formulae, both of which are scattered all around the lab, and once you've found everything, you'll get to work on creating the antidote itself. I found both aspects enjoyable. Running around like a headless chicken trying to find the last missing formula is just as fun as doing the same, looking for what you need to do based on given formula. Lower difficulty levels are a breeze and effectively just there to familiarize you with the core concept, but higher difficulty levels are where the game truly shines. Here, you'll have to hurry, but still be careful as you could easily spill or break ingredients, and even doing your best can leave you in a situation where so much time has passed already that you can't just reach the equipment without spilling, so you'll have to move objects in your surroundings to create a set of stairs for yourself. It's a truly unique experience that I'd recommend to practically anyone. There are 2 additional preset game modes, a low gravity one and a version where you start out small already. Previous one is okay, but I wouldn't really get back into it. Latter one actually beat my ass so hard I barely even managed to find all the inputs. By the time I already shrunk so small I could not interact with anything. As an added positive aspect, all the different game difficulties and modes are available right from the get-go, so you don't have to farm game time in order to access any feature, and there's a section where you can just custom create whatever game mode you want via a boatload of available sliders. I wish the game had some sort of campaign mode with cleverly put together environments and challenges, increasing difficulty maybe, but without this functionality, general replayability comes from all interactables being randomly generated on start, leading to slightly different experiences along the same lines every time. And this is pretty much the only negative I can bring up regarding Size Matters. The amount of time you'll get out of it will vary heavily on a person-to-person basis. Some will get tired of and over it relatively soon, while others I'm sure will stay longer. All in all, I had great fun with this title, and I'm sure you will too, as long as you understand it's not something you'll play for hours on end, but rather a game you boot up every now and then for some fun, fake science messing around.
Levelhead. Sadly, the platformer genre is packed with contenders, and there are not many revolutionaries out there. Luckily, indie games are still looking for innovative ways to make them interesting and fresher. Levelhead is one of these cases, and although it does not have the appeal of a license like Super Mario Maker behind it, it is ideal for those who are looking for a platform game with an editor. Butterscotch Shenanigan's Levelhead is double the fun of the classic platformer and the editor. There is a story mode or a campaign which consists of distributing packages throughout the galaxy. You will be playing as a small delivery robot that must send small boxes to the customers. This will be the frame of the whole gameplay, getting the box and reaching the end of the level. The controls are great and precise, and it doesn't feel finicky at all. Also, the game hits you with a wide variety of tools and an extendable robot arm, so there will be plenty of challenges ahead of the player. such as blades, spiked balls, cloud-like platforms that disappear when jumping on them, different switches, wandering enemies, invisible walls, so on, etc. The other main aspect of the game is, of course, the player-tailored levels, and the editor you can use to entertain other players. It is really simple to learn, and it is a matter of selecting blocks, enemies or gates and placing them on a grid, and that's it. Put some enemies and traps here and there, maybe some secret walls with collectibles, and you're all set, and it can be shared with other players just as easy. And in here the devs get a big plus from me, as they put this whole editor thing into the tutorial as well. All in all, I had great time with this. Levelhead is a fun little platformer, and if you are into the aesthetic, you should really get your hands on this one.
Vane is a third-person adventure/puzzle game, and this review kind of breaks my heart. We'll get to that part soon. First things first though, you start out controlling a little boy in the middle of a stylized, but in its own right absolutely great-looking stormy environment, soon to be left for dead by a weird bird costume dude. You then swap over to a different time and space, now controlling a crow-looking bird, and are left to wonder what the hell you're expected to do. Vane follows the no-hands-held approach to a degree, where it's so cautious not to touch those hands, it has chopped off not only your hands but their own as well. At this point, the only thing the game has had popped up was its super creative and great looking logo, not even a second worth of pop-up on controls. Now to be fair, this isn't the first title in history that takes this approach, and since you're under no time pressure, it's all fine leaving you to discover what the hell could be going on. I personally super enjoyed this part. That being said, by the time you get to this point, you can already see a few cracks on the surface. First major one being, despite the store page claiming Vane supports controller gameplay, the game actually flat out refuses to recognize an Xbox One controller being connected, no matter what you do. Secondly, the third person point of view is weirdly placed, and it isn't fixed but rather moves around, and that, combined with the not even close to streamlined controls, makes the experience rougher than necessary, although, in my humble opinion, not even remotely as rough as the Steam reviews would portray. Other than these issues, and one or two visual glitches however, you're looking at a really relaxing and enjoyable exploration experience, paired with some light puzzling as you figure out what you need to do to advance. Basic idea being, you'll be alternating between bird form and human form, usually to gather your bird bros to activate some switch, and I really enjoyed my time with Vane, right up till the point where you reach an area centered around puzzling with a huge ball. This part, however, is so utterly broken, it's hard to describe. As mentioned earlier, due to the no-hands-held approach, you get no instructions on what's going on. I barely understand myself even after finishing the entire game, so bear with me. But the idea is, the ball is capable of restoring its surroundings if you chant with your buddies around. You'll figure this out quite easily, and it could all be great, but issue is, for the life of me, I couldn't replicate where exactly the ball needs to be, and where you need to be yourself to interact with it to work. Replicating the same exact steps can result in it either working as intended or not at all. This entire section is so infuriating, I had to step away and destroy the living room furnishing before I could continue, and I suspect most would never even return. Should you for some reason power through this entire experience, however, the game returns to being a fun, relaxing adventure of altogether I would say approximately 3 to 4 hours, that I so would have loved to rate as one of the top titles of this month, but there's just absolutely no way I can place it anywhere other than the broken pile.
Relicta. The developers Mighty Polygon had a clear vision in mind and wanted to build their puzzle adventure game by focusing on two well-defined elements: gravity and magnetism. And thus was born Relicta. You will be playing as Angelica Patel, a researcher who lives and works on the moon, more precisely within the Chandra base. The story begins with an imminent danger that poses a threat to everyone and serves as a tutorial introducing the basics of the gameplay. After this, the game will revert back a few hours before the impending disaster. During a phone call with our daughter, suddenly the communication goes off and we have to find out what the problem is. By using our freshly acquired knowledge of gravity and magnetism, we are reconnecting the main terminal just to perform a reboot. After that, the system AI tells us that it was just a malfunction. Contacting our colleagues, however, we discover that other areas of the base are also showing problems. The gameplay revolves around three basic actions: altering the gravity of the cube, and the other two actions are responsible for the cube's magnetic field, rendering them positive or negative. The courses are built upon these three interactions. You have to use magnetism to pull or push boxes, gravity to make them float, etc. You will face with different plates or walls teleporting cubes. During the adventure, players will have to face increasingly complex puzzles, in which all of the gathered knowledge will be used. Eventually, some modifiable plates will need to be set correctly to allow the cubes to avoid obstacles, or they will have to be positioned correctly with gravity logged on to be used as elevators. I have to say it is a blast to play, although I have to mention, though the complexity is spot on, even when it comes to the real head scratchers. The mechanics will stay the same, thus the variety of the tasks will never really change. The voice acting is okay, the scenery is well designed. Overall, Relicta is an interesting puzzle game, offering excellent puzzle based on two elements of physics: gravity and magnetism. Unfortunately, however, it doesn't shine for the variety in the long run. The mechanics are sadly repetitive. But if you guys want a game that makes you think, Relicta is the game for you.
I don't know about you, but personally, despite looking at a boatload of previously never heard of titles, after the first glance I was actually pretty excited to jump into this month's bundle. Our leading titles were a single-player survival FPS, a third-person ARPG, and a Souls-like entry. Beyond this, we were looking at a light-hearted cooking and a chemistry simulation, 2 platformers, 2 puzzle games, a party platform arena shooter, an RPG, and an adventure game. Based on our experience, top entries of the May package are Darksiders Genesis, Mørkredd, Size Matters, Fury, and Hellpoint. Unfortunately, due to the non-existent player base of Retimed, and the sadly broken state of a specific section in Vane, these 2 titles had to be relegated to the disaster section. We also found Cook lackluster, but the remainder titles form a solid midfield group. This sums up to a total of 24 points out of the maximum 36, closing a month of high variance in quality. As always, we'd be very grateful if you please the machine gods by liking our video. If you'd like to come along for next month's ride, don't hesitate to subscribe. Any and all recommendations are welcome in the comment section. I would truly recommend you stay away from the new Mortal Kombat movie as it's a tragedy, and we hope to see you again in June.